All right, let's dive into a really fascinating and pretty dense philosophical story, the Jester's parable of the frozen waterfall. This is a crucial chapter in the larger narrative, one that's been called the trial of the mirror self. It's where our protagonist, the Jester, finally gets away from his pursuers only to run smack into an enemy who is, in a way, just a reflection of himself.
So, right out of the gate, the story hits us with this. The Jester is just staring at a frozen waterfall and says this incredibly cryptic line. You're probably thinking, what in the world is Fichtean stasis? Well, that's exactly what we're going to unpack, because that one phrase, it's the key to this entire philosophical showdown.
So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at the mirror in the ice and what the Jester sees in it. Then, a warrior shows up to challenge him. After that, we'll get into their very unusual duel, see how it all shatters, and finally, wrap up with the lesson of the river of becoming.
Okay, let's set the scene. The Jester has managed to outrun his trackers, and he's climbed way up into the mountains. The air is thin, it's cold, and it's here that he has to face the philosophical weight of his own shadow.
Now, this isn't just some scenic view. The Isphos, this gigantic waterfall frozen in place, is a symbol. It represents a state of complete paralysis. You have the will of the water, which is to fall, and the will of the frost, which is to hold it back. They've locked each other in a stalemate. The Jester even calls it a monument to a will that's frozen by its own fear of moving forward.
And when the Jester looks into this icy mirror, what he sees is his own divided self. His gold side, that's his intellect, his ambition, looks like a king trapped in a tomb. And his verdant side, life, nature, growth, is just a mess of dead branches. The message is clear. He is just as stuck as that waterfall.
And that brings us right back to that quote from the beginning. So Fichtean stasis is basically a philosophical term for a total deadlock. It's when your inner self, the I, and everything outside of you, the not I, are pushing against each other so hard that nothing can move. It's a perfect frozen conflict, and the Jester realizes he's trapped in it.
So just as our Jester is wrestling with this huge philosophical problem, a very, very physical problem shows up. You could say the external world, the not I, literally just walked out from behind a rock to pick a fight.
And here he is, Hrolf the Iron-Eyed. Now you gotta understand, he's not here for money. This is personal. He feels the Jester insulted his honor, his very sovereignty, and in his mind, the only way to get it back, to prove his own power, is to destroy the Jester.
Hrolf's challenge really just lays it all out on the table. It's a total clash of worldviews. He looks at the Jester's philosophizing and just sees weakness. For Hrolf, the world is simple. It's about swords and strength. He's basically daring the Jester to prove that all his clever ideas can actually stand up to a very real, very sharp blow.
Now, to really get what's happening, it's so important to see Hrolf as more than just some guy. He is the not I made flesh. He represents every external pressure, every outside force that tries to crush your internal freedom with brute strength.
And this is where we hit the climax. So how does a philosopher fight a Viking? Well, the Jester's response is absolutely brilliant, because he doesn't fight with a weapon. Instead, he decides to deconstruct the very idea of the fight itself.
As Hrolf comes charging in, sword held high, the Jester does the absolute last thing you'd expect. He doesn't pull a weapon. He doesn't run. He just calmly leans his head against the frozen waterfall and closes his eyes. He is completely refusing to accept the rules of Hrolf's world.
Okay, this is the Jester's big move. It's called an ontological deconstruction. Sounds fancy? I know, but let's break it down. First, he reframes his own self. He decides he's not a body about to be hit, but instead he is the cold that's holding the waterfall together. Second, this sidesteps the whole attack. Hrolf's sword just smashes into ice, not a person. And third, the genius part, it reveals the truth. Hrolf wasn't really attacking the Jester, he was attacking a reflection of his own need for power.
And this is how the Jester explains it, with a laugh. He's telling Hrolf, "You think you're fighting me, but you're really just swinging your sword at your own shadow, at your own emptiness and desperation to feel important."
This is the absolute core of the argument. It's all about redefining sovereignty. Hrolf thinks it means having power over other people. The Jester shows him that true sovereignty is something else entirely. It's realizing that you and your opponent are both just sparks from the same fire. You're connected. The fight itself is just an illusion born from that frozen stasis.
Now you might think this is all just a clever mind game, right?
But this philosophical victory has a very real, very physical consequence. The Jester's idea, his understanding, literally changes the world around him.
You know, Roll's powerful sword swing barely chipped the ice. But now the Jester, having won the real battle, just gives the ice a little tap with his rattle. And that tiny gesture, backed by this new understanding, sends a massive crack groaning through the whole waterfall.
The Jester shouts that the real outcome here isn't about one man beating another. The whole point of their conflict was to break the paralysis, that Fichtean stasis they were all trapped in. Their fight actually served a purpose. It ended the gridlock.
And then the whole thing just gives way. The waterfall shatters. The river is suddenly flowing again, a chaotic, powerful rush of becoming. And Hrolf, the man who represented rigid, static force, is immediately swept off his feet by a current he helped unleash but has absolutely no control over.
And that brings us to the final, kind of chilling lesson of the whole parable. The Jester delivers it while he's just standing there on dry land, watching the warrior get tossed around by the water. Here's the final scoreboard. The Jester, by embracing change and understanding the flow, becomes the activity itself. He's dynamic, he's in control. But Hrolf, by trying to fight that flow with brute force, becomes nothing more than the obstacle, literally weighed down by his pride and his armor, drowning in the very change he fought so hard against. This is just the ultimate mic drop moment. The Jester's message is so profound. He doesn't win by playing the hero's game of fighting head-on. No, he wins by changing the very foundation of the conflict. He removes the ice, the frozen assumptions, the stasis that his opponent was standing on. And with that, the Jester just turns and continues his journey, always moving upward, always becoming something new. Hrolf is just left behind, shivering in the river, finally realizing that his own powerful will wasn't a weapon at all, but a weight that was pulling him under.
So this parable, as abstract and philosophical as it feels, it really leaves us with a very direct and very personal question. It forces us to look at our own lives, our own conflicts, our own moments of being stuck and ask, what ice are you standing on? And what would it take, not to fight harder, but to simply break it?